The wind thrums through the old hemlocks of Vermont's Green Mountains like a secret hymn, low and insistent. Listen closely. This is a real story whispered by moss-cloaked boulders and the restless Black Branch stream. A tale of 5 souls who entered the Bennington Triangle between 1945 and 1950 and were never heard from again. Their footsteps seemed to dissolve mid-stride, as though the forest itself unstitched them from the world. Some vanished beneath a winter moon, others in full daylight before astonished witnesses. Yet all were ultimately absorbed into the same stretch of haunted wilderness sprawled around Glastonbury Mountain. Tonight, we retrace their fading echoes. We will sift ash from campfire legends, brush aside decades of snow-damp newspaper clippings, and peel back rumors of serial predators, occult portals, and doorways to regions beyond reason. 8 chapters stand before you like trail markers along an overgrown logging road. Follow them carefully, for the forest remembers every trespass. And if you feel a sudden hush, a breathless, brittle pause in the pines, know that you have stepped into territory where time itself stumbles. So dim the lights, silence your phone, and lean a little closer to the glow of the screen. The story begins now. Chapter 1. The Shadow over Glastonbury. The forest remembers every footfall, every startled breath, every glint of lantern glass that ever pierced its understory. Beneath the granite shoulder of Glastonbury Mountain, the hemlocks knit their boughs so tightly that daylight arrives in slivers, thin as razors, and the wind funnels between trunks in a low, unbroken moan. Hunters swear that if you stand very still, you can feel the trees listening, each needle quivering like the tuned string of a violin, waiting for the next human note to tremble through the gloom. Paula Jean Welden woke on 1st December 1945 with coal smoke drifting under her dormitory door and frost silvering her single pane of glass. She watched her breath puff into the chilled room, then swung her legs over the side of the narrow bed with the quiet decisiveness her friends called mountain spirit. She was 20, but there was an old velocity inside her, as though she trusted movement more than the soft promises of idling daylight. She layered wool stockings, a corduroy skirt the color of autumn rust, and a plaid flannel that smelled faintly of pine detergent. Finally, she shrugged on the brilliant red parka that had become her signature against Vermont's grayscale winter. Students said they could find her half a mile off just by that blaze of color. It seemed impossible that something so bright could ever disappear. Classes had emptied for the weekend, leaving Bennington College hollow and echoing. Typewriter carriages sat cocked on abandoned desks, bicycles leaned like hibernating deer beneath the colonnade, and the dining hall exhaled a tired odor of boiled potatoes no one was eager to face. Paula disliked suspension. She wanted the forest's electric certainty, the surge of heartbeats hammering in time with bootsteps, the hush when you finally stood alone between trees older than the Republic. She told her roommate she was just going to stretch her legs, but when she opened her desk drawer, she removed her small Eveready flashlight, a fold-out map of the Appalachian Gap Trail, and a slim notebook still creased to a half-finished physics problem. Down in Bennington proper, the streets glistened where salt slurry had melted yesterday's snowfall. Paula bought a peppermint stick at Whitman's drugstore, then plucked a trail map from the rotating rack, and paid 11 cents in nickels. She walked to the bus depot with her collar up, humming half a tune her father used to whistle after chores. Inside the depot, the wood-burning stove rattled, throwing sparks that died before they touched the tin floor. 24 tickets sold for the 1:30 northbound. Paula's was number 13. The driver, an ex-army corporal with a tobacco-yellow mustache, punched the stub and nodded toward the back. The ride into the mountains felt like traveling through an old photograph slowly overexposed to darkness. Farms blurred into stone fences, then into pine columns that rose like cathedral pillars on either side of the road. The driver switched on the aisle bulbs, bathing the bus in jaundiced light. Paula pressed her gloved palm to the window, letting the condensation feather outward around her fingertips. She watched her reflection superimpose over the trees, wide hazel eyes, a ribbon that refused to hold all her blonde curls, and that characteristic half-smile professors mistook for shyness. In truth, she was only observant, perpetually poised at the brink of an unwritten hypothesis about how the world arranged itself. Through those same panes, other passengers watched her too. A salesman heading to Rutland noticed the scarlet flash of her parka against the bus's interior gloom. Two sisters traveling home from a school recital whispered about her bravery. Who hikes alone in winter? Yet no one spoke directly to the girl in seat 14B, and no one rose when she pulled the cord at Woodford Hollow. The bus hissed to a halt beside a battered signpost, Appalachian Gap, no winter maintenance. Gravel popped beneath Paula's heels as she stepped onto the shoulder. Cold struck her lungs like a physical presence, sharp and a little sweet. The bus door folded shut, its tail lights dwindled to twin embers and winked out beyond a curve. Silence poured over the scene, so complete she could hear the minute snap of frost forming on distant branches. The trailhead was barely more than a seam in the snow, but Paula's stride was confident. Her hobnailed boots bit the crust with rhythmic crunches, and she tracked each breath as a plume, counting seconds until it faded, an unconscious experiment in heat exchange between living bodies and frozen air. Every so often she paused to orient herself. A beech tree splintered by lightning, a lichen-scabbed boulder shaped like a toppled altar, the faint perpendicular groove of a decades-dead logging sled once bound for Glastonbury's mill. Far below, in Bennington's bars, old men hunched over shot glasses would have shaken their heads. They said the mountain was wrong. Long before the logging company failed and the rail spur rusted, Glastonbury swallowed men whole. Railroad workers crushed by rockslides that came from nowhere. A farmer who vanished while checking fence lines, leaving half a cigarette still lit on a stump. Even an itinerant preacher who claimed doorways in stone punctured the ridge. By 1899, the township had disincorporated, and its clapboard houses sagged into moss. Maps remained, but locals winked and whispered, papers one thing, mountains another. Paula knew none of these details, though she had heard vague cautions about winter trails. The sky, however, seemed fickle. At 2:15, clouds gathered like cavalry banners, and snow began, feathery, tentative, before thickening into determined flakes. She zipped her parka to the collar, felt snow settle on her eyelashes, and told herself she would turn back at the lookout shelter marked less than a mile ahead. She crossed Deer Lick Brook, using ice-glazed stepping stones. The water's surface puckered where current gnawed through the thin shell, emitting a faint tinkling like distant wind chimes. On the far bank, the trail climbed in switchbacks. Each bend revealed older trees, trunks so wide 2 people could barely link arms around them. Their crowns eclipsed the parchment sky until afternoon dimmed into a premature twilight. Then the compass in her pocket spun. She felt the motion before she saw it, a tug low in the gut, like an elevator dropping a single floor. She fished the brass thing out, tapped the glass, watched the needle wheel madly, unwilling to settle. Snow thickened into a white curtain. Her flashlight's beam shortened, seeming to fight the air itself. Somewhere uphill, a crow applauded with hollow wing beats, then abruptly ceased, as though a door had slammed on the sound. A glow appeared 10 yards ahead, a small amber orb hanging mid-air, pulsing faintly behind the snowfall. The rational part of Paula's mind offered possibilities, miner's lamp, prank mirror catching dusk light, but the forest exhaled a strange metallic odor and every hair on her arms rose. She called out, but the hush devoured her voice. The orb retreated 2 steps into the trees, maintaining distance like a coy dance partner. Something, Curiosity, maybe destiny, pulled her from the trail. She navigated a lattice of roots, slick as eel skin, breaking brittle twigs that snapped like rifle fire. Still, the hush deepened until even the pat of snow on her hood seemed deafening. She swept the flashlight in a slow arc. Hemlock trunks, moss-green stone, the orb, now larger, almost a portal framed in flickering bronze light. Inside it she glimpsed impossible movement, trees bending in directions that contradicted gravity, shadows keeping pace with no bodies to cast them, a strip of moonlit sky that did not match the hour. Her breath tasted of static. The light swelled, edges rippling as though some unseen pebble had struck its surface. Paula took a final step. Snow crust cracked under her boot, the world pitched. For an instant the forest inverted, treetops below, frozen earth above, before collapsing into searing radiance. There was no scream, no thud, only a soft implosion of air rushing to occupy a Paula-shaped absence. Snowflakes spiraled through the space where she had stood. Her footprints ended mid-stride, two neat impressions pointed toward nothing. Far away, the crow's solitary call resumed, subdued now, as though sounding inside a deep tunnel. Nightfall arrived with heavy snow that erased even the freshest tracks. By Sunday evening, Paula's empty seat in the dining hall raised concern. By Monday, frantic calls reached the sheriff. Search parties pushed into the mountains, their flashlights bobbing like fireflies amid white gloom. They found tracks to Deer Lick Brook, located the spot where a map had fluttered into a snowbank, heard bloodhounds whine and refused to go farther. But no body, no parka, not even a dropped pencil. Planes traced grids across the glazed wilderness, their engines a distant snarl against the wind, yet the forest below looked smooth and innocent, as if nothing human had ever trespassed there. Presses thundered, headlines screamed, mystery girl lost in wilds. Professors offered theories: amnesia, romantic elopement, accidental drowning beneath river ice. Campus vigil candles guttered in December gusts. But in taverns and farmhouse kitchens, the locals said one sentence again and again: the mountain took her. They said it the way farmers speak of storms and floods, inevitable, indiscriminate, beyond the reach of sheriff's badges or search plane fuel budgets. Weeks crawled into spring, and Paula's legend deepened. Students left a lantern burning each December 1st in a dormer window, praying the glow might lure her back. Hunters reported flashes of crimson flickering between fir trunks during snow squalls. Some swore they heard a soft female voice reciting half-remembered physics equations, syllables torn apart by the wind. No hard evidence surfaced. The mountain kept every secret, as though sewn into its granite heart. And yet Glastonbury was not satisfied. 11 months later, in mid-December 1946, an army veteran named James Tedford would vanish from an open bus seat while 20 passengers sat inches away. But that is a tale for another dusk. For now, feel the hush closing over this first name, this first bright coat swallowed by snow. Listen, the trees are resetting, the crow is circling, and somewhere an unseen compass needle spins and spins, refusing to choose a direction. Chapter 2. The Man Who Vanished Between Stops. The year 1946 rolled into Vermont with sleet that rattled against tin roofs like handfuls of gravel. War-weary townsfolk patched their barns, ration stamps became curious relics, and men who had marched through Europe now marched up Church Street looking for work that felt less like digging trenches in their own memories. One such man was James Everett Tedford, 58 years old, twice widowed, and lately resigned to the quiet routines of the Bennington soldiers' home. He carried his loneliness in the bend of his shoulders, but his eyes still held a soldier's habit of scanning horizons, as though some unfinished duty waited out there under the grey Vermont sky. James spent many evenings seated near the home's radio, Morse code fingers drumming the armrest to imaginary rhythms, while Glenn Miller crackled through the speaker. But come early December, he felt the itch to travel, all the way to St. Albans, where a fragment of family remained. He packed a canvas grip with 2 flannel shirts, a Bible frayed at Exodus, and a hand-carved chess set, missing its black queen. Before dawn on Sunday, the 1st of December, he boarded a green mountain transit coach for the northern route. Conductor Stanley Gertz tore the ticket, tipped his cap, and escorted the veteran to a window seat 3 rows from the back. The bus hissed across frost-scabbed county lines, collecting passengers whose drowsy silhouettes blurred into a single foggy tableau behind trembling panes. James watched Barnes tilt past and thought how war had taught him that landscapes always looked innocent moments before catastrophe. Yet nothing in his mind's dossier explained the corridor of forest outside Bennington, a place locals now whispered about as the Bennington Triangle, half in jest, half in dread, ever since the Paula Welden headlines had faded into unsolved amber a year before. Roads narrowed, shoulders vanished beneath brittle underbrush, and Route 7 curved into foothills where Glastonbury's silent flank dominated every rearview mirror. The driver flicked the coach lights on low. The aisle glowed the color of weak tea. 19 riders slouched against rattling windows, snow-streaked boots stacked under seats. Stanley, the conductor, walked the aisle, counting heads with casual precision. He would swear under oath there were exactly 20 passengers, including himself, when they left Bennington. James Tedford sat upright, reading Psalm 91 beneath the glow of an overhead bulb, lips moving soundlessly. Outside, flurries built their siege. Snow whitened the evergreen crowns, blurred the line between heavens and hills, until the world resembled a photograph overexposed to oblivion. Somewhere beyond Shaftesbury, the bus slowed for a hairpin bend, notorious for sheet ice skids. Passengers leaned in synchronous tilt, a hush falling as tires whispered against frozen tar. On the uphill that followed, engines labored, and sleet drummed louder on the roof. So loud, some would later say, you could lose track of breathing. When the bus finally clattered onto the level stretch, approaching the sleepy whistle-stop of North Bennington, Stanley rose once more to reassure everyone they were only 10 minutes behind schedule. He glanced at James, intending a friendly nod. But seat 3B cradled only a Bible lying open at verse 11. For he will command his angels concerning you to guard you in all your ways. And next to it, a folded wool cap still warm from a body that was no longer there. Stanley blinked, scanned the floor for a fallen cane, checked under the seat as though a full-grown man might have collapsed into crawl space. Nothing. He looked up in mounting alarm. The window was latched from inside, unbroken. The aisle was empty all the way to the lavatory. The rear exit bore its silver emergency seal intact. He halted the driver and did a full head count. 19 souls, including himself. 1 less than Bennington. In North Bennington, the state trooper who boarded found only the same equation: cap plus Bible minus man. Snow around the coach showed no prints but the trooper's own. Riders were questioned on the verge of tears, each certain they had glimpsed the veteran mere minutes prior. The elderly woman who'd shared conversation about sugar-act maple candy swore she nodded to him right after Shaftesbury. A husky logger confessed he'd borrowed a match from Tedford to light his pipe near Woodford, just before the flurries got thick. No one could place the exact moment the seat went empty. It was as if the storm itself had reached through glass and plucked the man into whiteness. Search parties retraced the bus's route, peering into culverts, tapping frozen creek beds with poles. Reporters descended, notebooks bristling like winter crows. Comparison to Paula Welden became headline shorthand. Triangle claims second victim, barked the Rutland Herald, though the word victim felt premature. There was, after all, no crime scene, no blood, just subtraction. At the soldier's home, James's chessmates kept the board set for him 7 evenings running, black queen replaced by an ivory domino, so the game looked almost whole. Rumour said a nurse woke in the small hours to find every curtain in the dormitory blowing inward, though the windows were shut. Rumour said the radio near the empty armchair crackled with a burst of static that sounded eerily like marching orders. Rumour, because facts were useless here. What chilled the investigators more than paranormal conjecture was the plain logistical impossibility. A man disembarking requires a halt, a door swish, a step down. None of these occurred. Between the slippery S-curve at Shaftesbury and the straightaway into North Bennington, there was no scheduled stop. No slow roll opportunity to jump without breaking both legs on frozen gravel. Even if James had flung himself out, Stanley argued, someone would have heard the lever slam or felt the draft. Instead, there had been only the sullen percussion of sleet on steel, a womb of white noise in which reality might blur, and something within that noise had quietly rewritten the passenger manifest. By Christmas, 2 disappearances 17 miles apart over 2 Decembers could still be coincidence. Authorities insisted so. Yet older Vermonters shook their heads, remembering eerie campfire tales from the 19th century logging days. Teamsters adrift on moonless nights, hearing phantom whistles of trains long dismantled, workers swallowed by sudden pockets of fog that smelled of iron filings and left behind neatly stacked boots. Those stories, dismissed as brandy talk, began slithering back into conversation like half-frozen streams thawing under uncertainty's sun. The mountain's reputation thickened. Hikers carrying compasses reported needles shivering off true north the closer they tramped toward Glastonbury's summit bowl. Hunters gutting a buck near Hell Hollow claimed the entrails steamed with an odor, not of deer but of hot pennies and ozone. Geologists endeavored to blame ferrous deposits. Folklorists muttered about Algonquin legends naming the peak the Cursed Gate, though citations proved slippery. Whatever the cause, locals began painting porch charms, 5-pointed pine bough stars, above their lintels, an old habit resurrected from attic trunks. Meanwhile, trooper dossiers grew fat with negative evidence. No trace of James Tedford ever surfaced. The chess set, Bible, and cap were boxed and labeled, filed under Vermont State Police, cold, case 46-12-A01. In the logbook margin, an officer scrawled one line in pencil, "Man disappeared into air." The words looked absurdly large against white paper, as though even handwriting balked at shrinking such impossibility to ledger increments. Winter relinquished its grip by April, and the maples foamed pale green along brook edges. College students biked dirt lanes jacketless, black flies resumed their tyranny, and the world tried to shrug off the strangeness. But families continuing to picnic at Bald Mountain Overlook noticed something disquieting. When children shouted across the valley, echoes came back delayed, faintly warped, as though the landscape itself contemplated each syllable before replying. Sound, like people, did not behave normally here. Then, in snowy mid-October of 1940 I apologize. Let me breathe and steady this narrative because chronology itself begins to feel brittle in the Bennington Triangle. It was mid-October of 1940 See? The tongue stumbles, the calendar stutters. But the records insist, October 12, 1949. A boy only 8 years old chased his dog into these same woods and vanished between 2 tree trunks while his mother was still scolding him to come back. Searchers would find dog prints circling a glacial boulder, then nothing. No boy prints leaving, just snowfall smoothing everything flat. That missing child would become Chapter 3. For now, close your eyes and picture the vacant seat on that northbound coach. The frayed upholstery still warm, the Bible's onion skin pages ruffling when the door finally opened at North Bennington. Imagine the storm listening with soft white ears, deciding what to keep. Here again the low engine drone, how it merges with the unbroken moan beneath Glastonbury's hemlocks until the two sounds become indistinguishable. a single subterranean frequency that eats men whole. Somewhere beyond common sight, where compass needles pinwheel and echoes hesitate, James Tedford walks still, perhaps on a road that runs parallel to ours, snowless, silent, lit by an amber glow like lantern flame refracted through hoarfrost. The black queen of his chess set is restored. He moves it down an invisible board toward an opponent we cannot name. And each December 1st, when the soldiers' home radio crackles at Psalm 91, the veterans nod, not frightened, but strangely comforted, as though receiving static blurred assurance that one of their own is still on patrol, just further afield than maps allow. Chapter 3, The Boy and the Silent Echo, Boy and the D. Cold sunlight slanted through leafless maple limbs on the 12th of October, 1949, painting paler versions of itself across the dirt track that wound toward Fayville, a hamlet so small it never troubled cartographers. The air smelled of spent foliage and distant wood smoke. It was the kind of day when you could almost hear winter unsheathing its blade in the high country. 8-year-old Paul Jepson stood at the back of his family's farm truck, tiny palms cupping a wriggling bundle of copper fur. The puppy, half hound, half mystery, whimpered in eager soprano, its paws too big for the rest of its body and its tail beating frantic applause against Paul's patched coat. His mother, Ruby Jepson, swung open the tailgate with a creak. She needed only 10 minutes to tend the pigs rooting in their wire pen beside the logging road. Paul begged to come, promising to stay within sight. She relented, tugging his wool cap snug over ears reddened by mountain wind. 2 rules, she said, eyeing him with the gentle sternness of women who have already buried one child to scarlet fever and refuse to cede another to reckless chance. Don't chase anything into the trees and answer when I call. Paul nodded, gaze already drifting to the rust-flaked tractor parked by the split-rail fence. The boy set the puppy down. It bounded over brittle grass, nose quivering like a tuning fork struck against unseen frequencies. Paul followed, each footfall sending up the faint scent of moss-damp soil. Just beyond the pasture gate, Glastonbury Mountain loomed, a grey shoulder capped by the season's first pearl dusting of snow. Adults discussed that mountain in hushed tones, peppering sentences with words children only half grasped. Disappearances, triangle, cursed. But kids saw merely a castle of endless climbs and secret forts. Paul's boots found an old wagon rutted into earth like fossil ribs. He imagined the tractor as a dragon and brandished a broken branch for sword. Across the yard, Mrs. Jepson scattered feed, the kernels striking trough metal with soft pings. She hummed a Sunday hymn out of key. In that lullaby of domestic clatter, the puppy darted toward the tree line after some invisible scent trail. Paul galloped behind, stick held aloft. He was 20 strides from the fence when the first echo slipped. That's what Ruby would later swear. An echo fell out of sync. She called, "Paulie, stay close." The hill tossed back her words, but stretched them like taffy, so the vowels lagged half a heartbeat behind the consonants. Paul heard the distortion and paused, head cocked. The puppy stopped too, tail frozen mid-wag. Somewhere deeper among the sugar maples, an answering bark rose. 3 notes, crisp, then abruptly clipped, as though someone pressed mute on a gramophone. The boy giggled and plunged after the sound. Ruby shouted again. This time the echo failed entirely. Her plea swallowed before it reached a second syllable. Wind dusted dry leaves across the field in manic whirls. She dropped her feed scoop and jogged toward the spot where Redcap bobbed moments earlier. There the grass parted into 2 short sets of footprints. Paul's and the puppy's, each pair ending like an ellipsis inches from the forest edge. Beyond, nothing. No child. No dog. Only the riot of ochre leaves skittering over damp earth, and overhead, a hush so profound it seemed almost manufactured, as if the mute button now blanketed every frequency above a whisper. Ruby's scream knifed the silence. This time, no echo returned at all. Within an hour, neighbors arrived, breath frosting, lanterns hoisted, repeating his name with the rising urgency of a litany. They combed the logging road, raked thickets with pitchforks, and beat every hollow stump with sticks in case the boy had crawled inside. But each sound died quick, as though the valley wore acoustic snowshoes. By dusk, sheriff's deputies led a wider hunt. 70 volunteers weaving formation beneath headlamps, leaving boot prints in soft loam that formed a grid of desperation. Search dogs from Rutland arrived after midnight. They circled the vanish point, hackles lifting but refused to advance. One bloodhound backed away, whining, tail clamped, drool stringing from jowls like surrender flags. Handlers cursed the animals, yanking leashes. The dogs planted paws, eyes rolling, and emitted guttural moans uncanny in their human-like distress. A deputy recorded the scent path as terminated. The word echoed through logs like the crack of a closing vault. Next morning, a line of volunteers linked hands across Hell Hollow Brook, sifting kettle pond reeds for any scrap of cloth. They found none, but each man reported a trick of hearing. When they shouted instructions, the mountains stuttered them back in duplicate, as though an unseen second chorus repeated orders 2 beats later from above the canopy. Among those echoes, some claimed, another voice drifted, childish lilts half buried in white noise. Yet directional triangulation proved impossible. The sound flitted like a bat in darkness, always at the periphery, never where flashlights pointed. Newspapers devoured the story. Bennington Triangle swallows child, barked the Burlington Free Press. Radio hosts speculated nightly. Some suspected a rogue black bear, others resurrected whispers of a giant catamount. A few invoked darker folklore, the man of the mountain, a ghostly hermit said to emerge barefoot from caves at first frost, coaxing victims away with the mimicry of loved ones' voices. Cherokee tales told of stone door portals, watchers between worlds, but no myth explained the simple physics, how 2 sets of tracks, one human, one canine, could end mid-stride on bare ground without a patch of snow to conceal evidence. Sheriff Cy Vincent arranged for Army Reserve units to scour the slopes with portable radio beacons. Day after day, men in olive drab vanished behind curtains of mist curling from ravines. They returned with frost-rimmed mustaches and eyes too wide, reporting compasses spinning erratic, radio static that rearranged itself into whispered phrases none could fully decipher. One sergeant heard a child reciting multiplication tables from the fog, voice echoing in infinite regress like a hall of mirrors. Yet recordings captured only the hiss of dead air. As October bled into November, the search scaled down. Ruby Jepson sat vigil on her front stoop, lantern burning until dawn each night. Occasionally she swore she glimpsed the puppy dashing between alder bushes, its coat gilt bright under moonlight, but the apparition always dissolved when she stood. When neighbor Clara Milner suggested grief was playing tricks, Ruby snapped, "Grief doesn't leave paw prints." On the frost-slick ground where Ruby pointed, there were indeed small paw marks leading toward Glastonbury's flank, too fresh to be remnants, too few to follow. Snow arrived early on Thanksgiving Eve, sealing the story in a white sarcophagus. The official report concluded the boy, presumed lost to wilderness hazard, remains unrecovered. But residents in Bennington locked doors they had never bothered to latch before. Children were forbidden beyond sightlines. And in parlors, old folks invoked bad luck if anyone whistled after dark. They said the mountain might whistle back, imitating the tune just to lure you closer. Historians would catalog Paul Jepson's disappearance as the 3rd plank in a 5-case bridge no one could cross without stumbling into the uncanny. Yet lists and ledgers miss the human ripples. Ruby's lantern guttering out in January, the month she spent muttering to empty air in a voice as thin as a pine needle. The farm she sold for pennies when every pig squeal reminded her of the vanished puppy's bark. Long after Ruby left Vermont, hikers bivouacked near Bald Mountain Summit reported, on windless nights, the frantic patter of unseen paws circling tents, followed by a child's giggle fading downslope. Skeptics argued for fox kits and imagination. Believers hiked faster through those sections, eyes fixed ahead, refusing to glance into the sly gaps between trees where the darkness arranged itself into 1,000 possible doorways. The forest, for its part, remained inscrutable, an archivist that kept no visible files yet never forgot. It carried Paula's scarlet parka in its memory, stored James Tedford's unplayed chess move, and now cradled the echo of a boy's laughter, suspended eternally at the octave of innocent wonder. And with each secret absorbed, the mountain grew quiet, as if fuller, heavier, the way a room feels after someone shuts a steel safe behind pale drywall. Winter settled hard, ice webs thickening over brooks. Only the crows seemed busy, black quills scribbling unreadable loops against pewter skies. Locals counted 3 vanishings in 4 years and whispered that calamity comes in 5s. They didn't know how right they were. Because in the summer of 1950, the 4th disappearance would unfold, not in shadowed forest, but beneath an open noon sun, witnessed by hunters, hikers, and even a trooper's binoculars. And still, the mountain would arrange for another subtraction. That story, full of gunshots ricocheting off thin air and a terrified girl whose footprints ended atop a flat boulder, waits ahead on the trail. But tonight, as you douse the lamp and close the shutters, listen for silence deeper than ordinary quiet, the hush that follows your own heartbeat. In that space, the mountain may murmur a single syllable of a boy's unfinished laughter. If it does, resist the temptation to answer. For echoes here do not merely return sound, they invite departure. Chapter 4. The Noonday Vanishing. Summer arrived on Glastonbury's western slopes like a revelation. After 5 years of whispered dread, the mountain dressed itself in cathedral greens. Fern fronds unfurled, trout lilies stippled the hollows, and alder catkins swayed above brooks running clear as bell glass. June light fell in golden sheets so bright they seemed to pin every shadow against the forest floor. People told themselves the wilderness looked harmless now, as though winter's ghastly ledger of disappearances had been an illusion spawned by frost. But the mountain, like a stage magician, knows that daylight misdirection is often the surest path to shock. On Saturday the 17th of June, 1950, Arlene May Carver, 17, full of restless laughter, freckles dusted across a sunburnt nose, joined her uncle's hunting party bound for Bald Mountain's high meadow. It was a family tradition. Hike early, picnic near noon, spend the afternoon teaching younger cousins to read deer sign. The group numbered 11 in all, from 64-year-old Horace Carver carrying a battered .30-30 Winchester down to 8-year-old Marie, who dragged a tin pail meant for blueberries. Arlene loved the ritual not for the hunt, but for the sense of fraternity beneath an infinite sky. This would be her last summer before college in Albany, and she meant to stuff it with enough memories to keep homesickness at bay. The morning trek unfolded like a rustic postcard. Dew steamed off boulders, chickadees ping-ponged chatter between spruce crowns, and the trail, really an old logging scar, rose in gentle switchbacks toward the meadow. Arlene walked rear guard, swinging a canvas satchel that thunked each step with the comforting weight of sandwiches, a thermos of sweet tea, and her leather-bound sketchbook. She hummed fragments of Sentimental Journey, letting the tune mingle with hushed rifle talk up front. By 11, the party reached the meadow, a shallow bowl carpeted in knee-high grass, and encircled by firs so densely ranked they resembled a living palisade. Sun pooled here, hot and direct. Wild columbine nodded scarlet heads. The Carvers shrugged off packs, propped rifles against stumps, and spread a patchwork of blankets. Horace cracked open a canteen, declared there would be no hunting until the heat eased, and insisted every rifle chamber remain empty in case the ghosts of the triangle were listening. The jest drew nervous titters. Arlene wandered a perimeter 15 yards beyond the blankets, eyes drinking the scenic overload. She knelt to sketch a cluster of tiger lilies blazing like small, controlled fires against the meadow's green sea. Pencil strokes scratched paper in a hypnotic rhythm. Each time she paused to shade, the breeze carried snippets of family chatter, jokes about Uncle Horace's snore, Marie's squeal when a grasshopper leapt onto her pail. Normalcy wrapped Arlene like a light cotton shawl. That is why the sound startled her. Not the content, just 2 rifle shots, but the timing. Every uncle's weapon lay in plain sight, barrels angled earthward. Yet the clap echoed from the tree line directly behind her, as though someone inside the woods had loosed a hurried double tap. Arlene stood, shading her eyes. The meadow acted as an acoustic amphitheater. The shots reverberated off the bowl's rim, making direction tricky. Horace shouted, "Who fired?" No answer. He grabbed his Winchester, snapped a shell into the chamber despite his own rule, and motioned the others to stay put. Arlene, curiosity overriding prudence, stepped toward the tree line to peer between the trunks. She entered a lattice of light and shadow so frenetic it seemed animated. Somewhere beyond, a branch cracked, deliberate, weighty. She called out, "Hello?" Only her echo returned, fragmented by tree boles and tossed back, sounding almost like another girl repeating the word with slight derision. "Hello, low?" A second branch snapped, this one closer. She glimpsed movement, a flicker of brown fabric among the spruce. Hunter. No blaze orange, no call of acknowledgement. Instead, a hush settled, complete and unsettling. The same silence Ruby Jepson had suffered when her call failed to echo. Arlene's pulse synced with the cicada's droning crescendo. She pivoted, intent on retreat, but the ground under her boots felt subtly wrong, as if the crust of soil floated above a hollow chamber. She heard a wet, sucking gurgle, then smelled iron and ozone mingling, reminiscent of a struck match. 2 more steps, and the hush deepened until even her heartbeat seemed muffled. Back in the meadow, Uncle Horace watched Arlene's bright yellow bandana vanish behind a screen of mountain laurel. He shouted for her to return. When she didn't, he advanced 10 yards, caught sight of her silhouette, and then watched it blink out. Not fade behind foliage or slip downhill. Blink out mid-stride, like a film frame spliced away. He was so stunned he forgot the Winchester until his finger brushed the trigger. The family erupted into panic. Horace barreled into the trees, bellowing her name. The others formed a jittery search line. 3 minutes later, a Vermont state trooper, Evan Carlisle, happened upon the meadow while on a routine fire watch patrol. Carlisle raised binoculars just in time to witness Horace flailing through undergrowth. He hurried to assist, radioing base for backup. Within 40 minutes, 8 troopers and 19 volunteers converged. They found no tracks beyond a short trail of crushed grass ending atop a flat granite boulder pocked with lichen. On that boulder lay Arlene's sketchbook, open to the tiger lily drawing. The page was smeared by what looked like charcoal dust, though her pencil remained clipped to the binding unbroken. The dust, when touched, left a metallic residue on fingertips and smelled faintly of penny coins left in summer sun. Forensic analysis would later classify it simply as unknown ferrous particulate. The search extended through Monday. Bloodhounds again balked, planting paws exactly at the granite slab's edge, whining in confusion. Helicopters hammered the humid air, their rotor wash bending treetops like supplicant prayer sticks. Pilots reported brief flickers on the radar, interference that traced the outline of a perfect equilateral triangle extending from Bald Mountain to the upper reaches of Hell Hollow and back to Glastonbury's summit. Equipment techs blamed atmospheric anomalies. Mapmakers quietly noted coordinates. State police issued statements: unfortunate misadventure, possible abduction, ongoing investigation. Reporters resurrected the word portal, weaving psychic hotspots and geomagnetic vortices into lurid front-page puzzles. New England skeptics scoffed until a detail leaked. Trooper Carlisle's binoculars had recorded the moment Arlene vanished. He had been using surplus Army field glasses equipped with a basic sequential frame camera attachment designed for aerial mapping. The film, processed in Montpellier, revealed 3 frames. Frame 1, Arlene visible in profile, bandana bright, left foot lifted mid-step. Frame 2, figure blurred, outlines bleeding outward like watercolor struck by rain. Frame 3, empty woodland, only dust motes glittering where the figure had been. No splice mark, no mechanical jam. Experts at Kodak's Rochester lab found no explanation, finally labeling the negative stress artifact, though private memos admitted the distortion was like nothing they had archived. The film canister vanished from police evidence 2 weeks later. Someone penciled misfiled in the chain of custody ledger. Someone else added a question mark that bled through 6 pages from nervous pressing. For the Carver family, there was only the gut punch absence. Picnic baskets sat half-emptied on the meadow grass until dusk, when troopers finally ordered everyone out. Arlene's mother kept the sketchbook, refusing to let investigators box it. She stored it in a hope chest, where decades later the ferrous dust still marks her palm whenever she touches the page, a stain impossible to scrub away. The town of Bennington reacted like a body recoiling from a hot stove. Church attendance spiked, so did sales of padlocks. Families cancelled summer hikes, fishermen stayed below the timberline, and Camp Woodwind, a children's retreat near Bickford Hollow, closed abruptly for renovations, never to reopen. The Chamber of Commerce scheduled a press conference to soothe fears, but cancelled when the president's daughter woke screaming of a yellow bandana lady waving from the wardrobe mirror. Scientists proposed banal culprits: sinkholes obscured by leaf litter, sudden hypothermic confusion causing victims to wander beyond search grids, predatory wildlife swift enough to leave no traces. But these rational bullets ricocheted off Arlene's case because 20 eyewitnesses placed her inside a defined zone when she disappeared. She did not wander. She crossed an unseen threshold. Some locals returned to an older motif: windows. Places where the skin of reality thins, becoming translucent as old vellum, and unsuspecting souls step through before noticing the page has flipped. They said Glastonbury held such windows, perhaps 3, forming a triangle that rotated unpredictably like a trapdoor dial. Step on the right stone when the window is open, you're no longer in Vermont, maybe not even on Earth. One moonlit July night, Horace Carver revisited the meadow alone. He stood atop the granite slab, hat in hand, repeating his niece's name the way a veteran might recite coordinates to shell-shocked comrades. Each time he spoke, the meadow answered with a sound like distant rifle fire, one echo bouncing between tree lines, too crisp and too precisely timed to be real thunder. Morning hikers found Horace kneeling, palms pressed flat to the stone, as though feeling for vibrations. He rose, eyes haunted, and said only, "She's still moving somewhere. I can feel her pace." That summer, lightning storms raged over Glastonbury with unusual ferocity. Ball lightning was reported skittering along ridge crests. Entire clouds pulsed a lambent orange after midnight, like lanterns behind parchment. The state climatologist shrugged, regional anomaly, and scribbled upward spiking barometric graphs. Yet every time the clouds flashed, telephones rang off hooks in Bennington. People swore that amid the thunder they heard a girl's laugh, bright and startled, trailing into static. By autumn, Arlene Carver's case became the 4th subtraction on the triangle's sinister abacus, and no one doubted that a 5th bead waited to slide. The pattern's arithmetic felt queerly ordained, a disappearance each year or so, as though the mountain required periodic tithe. And if whispered prophecies held, the next tithe would arrive before year's end. Perhaps to balance some cosmic ledger, perhaps merely because 5 is the number that completes a pentangle. October storms collected over Vermont like bruises. Hunters sharpened knives they might never use. Mothers packed travel trunks for children they refused to let roam, and distant professors drafted papers on localized temporal dysmorphia. But the mountain listened, indifferent, its granite heart beating a rhythm older than mapping or mathematics. Under the moss, something stirred, an awareness maybe, or simply the slow tectonic exhale of stone dreaming of deeper silence. Whatever it was, it waited. Because late October would bring Frieda Langer, an experienced outdoors woman who knew every deer trail by compass and by foot memory, a woman convinced fear was only the shape ignorance took before education. She would vanish into a drizzle while walking less than 100 yards behind her cousin. And unlike the others, Frieda would come back, or at least what was left of her would, providing the only corpse the triangle ever relinquished, a final grotesque punctuation mark. That is Chapter 5's chill promise. For now, hear the wind rising outside your window, the way it rattles screens with a cadence reminiscent of distant gunfire. Listen for the meadow's hush behind the gusts. An endless noon suspended in memory, where a yellow bandana girl walks forever on a tread of granite dust that smells like coins held too long in a closed fist. Chapter 5. The Body That Came Back. Autumn in the Bennington Highlands carries a scent of copper leaves steeped in rainwater and a hush that gathers in gullies like cold smoke. By late October of 1950, the mountainside throbbed with uneasy expectation. Locals felt it in barometer bones and dreamt of blank-eyed hikers standing at their doors. Rumor insisted a 5th disappearance would complete the triangle's grim pentangle, and rumor rarely kept quiet for long. Frieda Evelyn Langer believed in facts instead of folklore. At 41, she had mapped more Vermont trails than many forest rangers, earning the nickname Compass Queen among her New Jersey mountaineering club. She and her husband Herbert owned a modest cabin at Somerset Reservoir, a rippled tongue of water licking Glastonbury's northern flank. That fall, they invited cousin Paul Langer and his wife to spend a long weekend amid flaming maples and loons that laughed at dawn. Frieda relished the chance to prove to Paul that the triangle was nothing more than superstition hung on coincidence. Morning of Sunday, October 28th, dawned drizzly, clouds dragging veils across spruce peaks. Frieda, undeterred, tightened her oilskin poncho and proposed a quick 3-mile loop around the reservoir's western marsh. Herbert nursed a wrenched knee and opted to tinker with the wood stove damper while Frieda and Paul set off along the bank. Mist beaded on alder branches. The reservoir lay flat as smoked glass. Half a mile in, Frieda misstepped on slick roots and splashed calf-deep into a pool the color of coffee. She laughed, boots sluicing mud, and called back that she would jog to camp, swap clothes, then meet Paul again on the trail within 20 minutes. He watched her lope away, black ponytails slapping her poncho hood, footsteps splashing a jaunty rhythm. She vanished around a bend where tall reeds met hemlock trunks that dripped steady rain. Paul continued 5 minutes more before guilt tugged him. After all, the trail was slippery. He turned back. The bend revealed only dripping reeds and 2 boot prints filling rapidly with water. He called her name. The forest answered with the hush of rain on fallen maple leaves, plus one hollow echo that seemed to come from under the ground, not above it. Back at camp, Herbert frowned. Frieda had not returned. Paul's face blanched. Together they hoofed the loop twice, shouting until voices cracked. By dusk, 6 neighbors and a sheriff's deputy combed the marsh edge. Flood lamps painted reeds in theatrical gold. Dragonflies danced like sparks. No coat, no boots, not even the wet sock she would surely have flung aside. Rain hardened overnight, drumming rooftops like a million anxious fingers. Monday brought state police, bloodhounds, and the first flashbulbs of regional reporters. The dogs traced her scent a quarter-mile, then moaned at a patch of marsh grass pressed flat, as if someone lay there briefly before dissolving into vapor. Helicopters from Grenier Air Force Base grid-searched the watershed. Their downdraft made concentric ripples across the reservoir, but revealed nothing but drowned stumps and cold depth. For 6 days, the mountain consumed volunteer hours like a starving god. Searchers waded peat bogs that sucked boots to the ankle, probed sinkholes, and hiked crumbling logging roads where the slate scree rattled of its own accord. One trooper swore he heard a woman humming "Blue Moon" beyond a screen of fir saplings, but when he parted the boughs, silence hit him like a sack of sand. November's first snowfall slicked every rock with sugar glaze. The official hunt suspended, the file labeled "missing person", presumed lost. Herbert Langer refused to quit. He walked shoreline every day, whispering her name into wind so raw it flayed his lips. When the reservoir froze, he laced skates and traced lonely figure-eights across black ice, listening for knocks from beneath. People pitied his grief, yet no one lingered near him at the general store. He had the look of a man living 1 inch out of phase with the world. Winter bled into spring. Snowmelt swelled brooks, carrying broken spruce limbs and the occasional lost snowshoe down to the reservoir. On the afternoon of May 20th, 1951, a fisherman motoring near the South Cove spotted something pale tangled in driftwood. He tied off, worked a pole hook, and recoiled when a human arm surfaced, skin-leached ivory. Authorities retrieved the body, bloated and half-skeletal. Clothing tattered but identifiable as Frieda's vanished outfit. Poncho shreds fused to rib bones, one boot still laced to an ankle. Forensic pathologist Dr. Morton Sawyer performed the autopsy. He expected standard freshwater decomposition after 7 months submerged. What he found unsettled him. The lungs held no water. Instead, they were collapsed and dry, as if airless long before contact with the lake. Hair remained silky, unmatting in rinse water. Muscle tissue, though degraded, showed no scavenger marks. Odd-given turtles and trout infest the cove. More troubling, Sawyer estimated death occurred no more than 3 weeks earlier, based on adipocere formation and insect colonization inside clothing layers. Yet dozens of troopers had dragged and dove-scanned that precise cove repeatedly in November and again in April when ice cleared. Dr. Sawyer's provisional notation read, "Post-mortem interval inconsistent with disappearance timeline." Privately, he told the sheriff, "Either she died recently, or time works funny out there." The sheriff grunted something about filing cabinets and locked the report where editors couldn't quote it. A week later, Sawyer discovered the upper lobe of Frieda's right lung bore a lattice of microscopic glassy filaments. Silicon strands woven like spider silk, but rigid as quartz. He summoned a metallurgical consultant who muttered about vapor-deposited silicate, not naturally occurring in lung tissue. Before further tests, the slides vanished from pathology storage. 2 months after that, Sawyer was transferred to a hospital in Rutland with no autopsy privileges. Frieda was buried on a warm June morning. Herbert laid her compass on the coffin lid instead of flowers. Reporters expected closure. Here, at last, a body, a cause. They received only deeper riddles. How did Frieda's corpse appear where searchers had scoured? Why did decomposition defy calendar math? And what were those glassy fibers threaded through dead airways? Editorial pages fluttered with speculation, abduction, murder, clandestine military test. Folklorists renewed talk of the mountain taking, but sometimes giving back, though never whole. Residents noted other oddities in the aftermath. On cloudless nights, a faint luminescence shimmered over the reservoir, triangulated by locals to the cove where Frieda surfaced. Fishermen trolling at dusk heard metallic clicking beneath hulls, as if unseen gears turned in the depths. Sonar pings returned murky silhouettes that did not match geology. One teenager camping illegally on the shore woke to find the lake glass flat. Stars mirrored so perfectly he could not tell whether he lay beneath the sky or its reflection. In that disorientation, he glimpsed a woman standing ankle-deep on the water 40 yards out, dark ponytail trailing down a poncho glossy with starlight. Then a ripple broke the illusion, and she was gone. The official ledger now tallied 5 disappearances, 4 never found and 1 returned beyond reasonable explanation. Statisticians argued the odds. Locals shook salt over their shoulders and avoided eye contact with the forest edge. The term Bennington Triangle moved from regional curiosity to national synonym for places that eat people. Travel writers omitted Glastonbury from foliage tour guides. Real estate listings within 10 miles dropped in price. Acreage sold sight unseen to out-of-state investors who flipped the deeds without once setting boot on moss. Yet, the mountain persisted, neither vindicated nor condemned, simply massive and inscrutable, cloaked each sunset in bruised purple shadow, as if drawing a curtain on its own stage. Those who dared bushwhack near Somerset Swamp sometimes found circular impressions in sphagnum moss, footprints yet not, arranged in patterns like orbital diagrams. They whispered of windows that open and shut, edges marked by metallic dust or static-tasting air. You could walk beneath a hemlock bough and emerge into a second, more fragile world. Stay too long, and the window might slam, pinning you between panes of time. The disappearances ceased after Frieda, as if the ledger's column now balanced. Perhaps 5 chalk marks on stone satisfied whatever algorithm governed Glastonbury's thirst. Optimists breathed relief. Skeptics cited improved trail signage and statewide adoption of blaze orange. But hikers still reported wandering fog banks that smelled faintly of burning wires. And sometimes, rarely, but enough to keep stories alive, radio operators on Route 9 caught bursts of a woman's voice, repeating coordinates that led nowhere on any map. Glastonbury itself remained uninhabited, an official ghost town since 1899. The old railroad grades grew over with hobblebush and ghost pipe. Winter drifts piled thigh-high against collapsed porches where yellow newspapers mummified between floorboards. Yet each year on October 28th, someone, no one knows who, leaves a fresh brass compass atop a moss-eaten mile marker near Somerset Reservoir. The compass needle spins for hours before finally freezing on a bearing that points straight into the lake's deepest pocket. Stand on that shore at midnight, wind stalled, and you might hear water glug as though something large is surfacing to take inventory of the world it briefly left behind. Or perhaps that's just the brain stitching sounds into patterns, trying to impose story on the dark. Still, locals do not fish the cove after sundown. They know bodies can come back, but knowledge won't make you whole. Chapter 6. Cartographers of the Unseen. After Frieda Langer's bleak return, Glastonbury's legend calcified into cautionary folklore. For most Vermonters, that was reason enough to steer clear. Yet to a small cadre of scientists and seekers, the 5 disappearances were not endings, but invitations, loose threads dangling from the fabric of reality, begging to be tugged. They arrived in 1s and 2s through the early 1950s, lugging equipment that rattled like skeletons in trunks. Seismographs sensitive enough to register vole footsteps, radio spectrographs tuned to whispers between suns, and cameras loaded with film that promised to snare the invisible under infrared flood. The first to plant his feet on Glastonbury's haunted soil was Dr. Gideon Marrow, a lean MIT geophysicist who mistrusted rumor but adored anomalies. He read about spinning compasses and said aloud, either a massive iron vein or something more interesting. In August of 1952, he brought 2 graduate assistants, a crate of magnetometers, and a dog-eared copy of Mysterious Disappearances of New England that he claimed was for color. They bivouacked on the old logging spur above Hell Hollow. Nights were warm enough for crickets to pulse a steady backbeat while the river murmured counterpoint. Gideon hammered copper stakes into the soil, wired coils, and set analog needles quivering. Hour after hour the dials held steady. Then, near 2:43 a.m. on the first night, every needle slammed east, held 5 seconds, and fell slack, as if reality itself had hiccuped. The grad students whooped. Gideon frowned. Could be sheet lightning, could be trolley interference, he grumbled, though the nearest trolley line lay 40 miles south and had been retired since the war. At breakfast, one assistant noticed a ring of blackened grass 10 yards from camp, a perfect circle 3 feet across. The tips of each blade were fused, glassy, as though a blowtorch had kissed them. Gideon snipped samples, sealed them in foil, and muttered, "Soil fulgurite." But no thunder had rumbled, and the sky remained a spotless cobalt. They pushed deeper, tracing ridges toward the reservoir. On the second night, the team erected a tripod camera fitted with time-delay shutters to capture any stray phosphorescence. Gideon stood watch while students slept. Crescent moonlight slathered the clearing in silver ink. At 3:08, the camera clicked. Gideon scanned the scene, nothing but fern silhouettes. A second click, still nothing. A third, but the shutter stuck open, whining until he severed power. The developed negatives revealed oddities. Fern fronds blurred into translucent smears, stones glowing from within as though lanterns buried at their cores, and midway down one frame, a featureless human outline. No details, just a void shaped like a man stepping mid-stride, edges fizzing with tiny points of light. Gideon dismissed it as double exposure. The students quietly mailed a copy to Fate magazine, which printed it under the caption, "Window Walker." Critics scoffed until they tried to replicate the artifact with controlled settings, and found failure after failure. September brought Marjorie Thorne, a radio engineer who tuned shortwave sets the way monks tuned lyres. She'd read of troopers hearing spectral voices and sought empirical proof. On a starlit equinox evening, she deployed a collapsible Yagi antenna atop Glastonbury's southern knob, dialed through static, and froze on a narrow band, emitting soft clicks at 7-second intervals. She triangulated. The signal source hovered less than 100 yards east, directly above a ravine known locally as Never's Hollow, where searchers had once lost all compass bearings within 50 feet. Marjorie inched toward the lip of that ravine, headset buzzing faint Morse she could not decode. Then her receiver went dead, battery strong, tubes glowing, but silence absolute. She returned to camp, where the device resumed its cryptic clicks as though nothing had happened. The next night the pattern changed. 3 clicks, pause, 5 clicks, pause, repeating until dawn. She recorded the sequence on magnetic tape and later showed it to Navy code analysts who shrugged. Not any cipher we teach. Word spread. By 1954, a loosely knit expedition formed under the grandiose title Operation Window. 13 men and women hungry to map, measure or otherwise cage whatever prowled the Bennington Triangle. They raised modest funds, printed letterheads, and hauled 1/2 ton of instruments up the timberline in mid-June. Base camp resembled a lunar outpost, tents glowing with oscilloscope light, aerials bristling like porcupine quills, reels of tape spooling enigmatic hiss. For 6 nights Glastonbury sulked, offering no tremor, no light, no voice. The team grew fractious. One engineer swore he heard someone weeping outside her tent, but no boot prints marked the moss. A physicist named Ray Chen walked perimeter at dawn and claimed the granite beneath his feet vibrated like distant machinery idling beneath the crust. Gideon Marrow scoffed, "Seismic micro-tremors." yet couldn't explain why the geophone downslope registered nothing. On the seventh night, the mountain retaliated with quiet ferocity. At 11:50 p.m., every battery drained in unison, voltage needles plummeting as though the earth had swallowed charge itself. Tents went black. Within that instant of blind night, one team member, cartographer Louise Emery, simply ceased to exist. Gideon, standing 3 feet away, felt a tug like wind through a door just opened. His flashlight flicked back on. Louise's notebook lay where she'd stood, pen uncapped mid-sentence. Panic. They shouted, brandished useless flares, found no tracks. Sunrise revealed Louise's mapping gear scattered in a line that ended abruptly at the ring of blackened grass discovered 2 summers earlier, its edges now fresh charred, warm to the touch. Gideon's rational spine snapped. He ordered evacuation. They packed before noon, tents half-folded, cables snaking behind. Operation Window dissolved in legal disputes and whispered blame. Families demanded explanations. Gideon's report offered only localized energy anomaly. The press, starved of facts, painted him a madman. He resigned from MIT, moved to New Mexico, and never spoke publicly again. Yet something had shifted. Louise Emery's disappearance reopened wounds, thought scabbed. 6 victims now, 5 bodies never found, 1 returned impossibly late. And still no pattern authorities dared stamp official. The Vermont State Police quietly restricted camping permits within 3 miles of Glastonbury's summit. The U.S. Forest Service posted weather-beaten signs. Unstable ground, area closed. Locals knew the signs were shorthand for darker truths, but outsiders treated them as relics of bureaucratic caution. 20-somethings from Boston piloted beetle green Volkswagens onto logging spurs, chasing campfire thrills. They returned to city life with little more than hangovers, yet each told the same uneasy story, sometime around 2 or 3 a.m., and the forest went utterly still. Moths pinned midair, and a pressure weighed on lungs as though they'd descended a mile underwater. Then, after a breathless eternity of 30 seconds, normal night sounds resumed, and the pressure vanished, leaving behind a hush inside their own memories they couldn't articulate. Meanwhile, the mountain continued its quiet experiments. Migratory birds detoured an invisible corridor above the triangle, forming a V-shaped gap in flocks visible on Doppler radar. Snow melt patterns sketched pentagonal outlines on aerial photographs, outlines that rotated a few degrees each spring. Amateur radio operators across New England occasionally caught bursts on the old Operation Window frequency. 3 clicks, pause, 5 clicks, pause, then a faint hiss like distant applause. In Montpellier archives, an overworked clerk pieced together a pattern. Every disappearance and major anomaly aligned with solar minimum cycles, the moments when sunspot activity dipped and Earth's magnetosphere relaxed its guard. He noted the next minimum was forecast for late 1957. The memo died in a drawer, but the date did not, for Glastonbury had its own calendar and it was counting down. Among those paying attention was Joan Fraser, a young journalist for the Brattleboro Reformer who smelled Pulitzer ink in the story's mix of tragedy and cosmic riddle. She interviewed troopers, pored through evidence boxes, and walked the old carriage road where Paula Welden vanished 12 years earlier. Joan carried a handheld wire recorder, capturing every birdsong and footfall, hoping the mountain might murmur confessions into the mic. On a crisp morning in September 1957, Joan hiked alone up Bald Mountain to the granite slab where Arlene's sketchbook had been found. She placed a fresh tape reel, pressed REC, and asked the wind, "Who are you?" Static answered. She asked again, and the recorder popped, a pulse so loud the VU needle slammed its peg. Terrified, she stowed the device. Later playback revealed a voice preceding the pop by half a second. It sounded like a girl on the edge of laughter, whisper shouting one word, "Window." Joan's editor dismissed the tape as faulty, but she persisted, filing weekly columns that blended shoe leather reporting with poetic dread. Readers devoured every installment. Tourism dipped further. Locked gates rusted, and by Christmas 1957, the Bennington Triangle had become America's most infamous patch of haunted wilderness. Yet through it all, the mountain withheld spectacle. No vanishings, no bodies, only that anticipatory hush like breath held behind a curtain. Sunspot counts bottomed on December 11th. That night, a glow ramped over Glastonbury, aurora borealis threading emerald ribbons between stars, rare this far south. Residents assembled on porches to marvel. In the glow, some swore they saw silhouettes crest the ridge. A girl in a red parka, a man holding a chess piece, a child chasing a barking pup, a young woman waving a yellow bandana, a hiker with a compass for a heart. They stood side by side like paper dolls against cosmic light, then folded back into the night's velour. Skeptics blamed pareidolia. Believers whispered that the mountain was opening its scrapbook. No one vanished that night, nor the next. Perhaps the ledger truly was full, or perhaps the triangle's appetite had changed from bodies to something subtler. Attention, reverence, the electricity of collective fear. Whatever the reason, Glastonbury settled into a deceptive calm that would endure nearly a decade, long enough for the tale to fade from national headlines, linger only in dog-eared library books, and become a dare uttered around Vermont campfires. But mountains are old, and they abide by geologic patience. When the next solar minimum rose on the far side of the 60s, the land would speak again, this time to a generation armed with transistor radios, psychedelic expectations, and an optimism unprepared for the cruelty of thin places. That awakening, and the unsolved disappearance of a film crew trying to capture the Triangle's secrets on 16mm stock, awaits in Chapter 7. For now, leave Operation Window's abandoned stakes rusting in moss, feel the antennae still humming with ghost clicks that only trees can decode, and remember Louise Emery's half-drawn map fluttering under cold stars, cartography of terrain no human eyes have walked, but which exists nonetheless inside the hush between heartbeat and echo. Chapter 7, The Celluloid Riddle. Summer of 1966 dawned on America gilded with promise. Astronauts kissed the stratosphere. Transistor radios thrummed with British invasion riffs, and college kids believed the future could be engineered out of equal parts protest and poetry. Into that easy, sun-struck optimism stepped Echo Line Productions, a 3-person documentary crew from NYU Film School chasing notoriety on 16mm stock. Director Leon Leo Kessler possessed a hurricane grin and a knack for conjuring grant money from thin air. Cinematographer Dominique Dom Reyes, lanky, camera-obsessed, saw the world in f-stops and grain structure. Sound recordist Helen Pike, whose father had marched on Selma, vowed to amplify truths the establishment kept muted. Their thesis project aimed to explore American thin places, locations where folklore claimed the membrane between worlds quivered. When Leo stumbled across a yellowed Brattleboro reformer clipping about the Bennington Triangle, he smelled cult success. They arrived in a dented Dodge panel van the week after Independence Day, armed with Bolex cameras, Nagra tape decks, and vibrantly naive courage. Locals at the Monument Diner shook heads, city kids seeking spook stories, but accepted the coffee refills. The crew rented a shuttered Ranger outpost on County Road 9, 10 miles short of Glastonbury's slope. Helen set her parabolic mic outside each twilight, capturing loon calls skating over Somerset Reservoir. Playback revealed faint clicks layered beneath the birdsong. 3, pause. 5, pause. The Morse-like pattern first caught by radio engineer Marjorie Thorne a decade earlier. Helen, unaware of that precedent, tagged the reel Forest Heartbeat. Dom's camera framed decaying rail beds, swallowed by birch saplings, his light meter buzzing at shafts of sunlight slicing the gloom. Early dailies looked exquisite, foliage swaying like a green ocean, spiderwebs lit as constellations. But Leo wanted blood pulse tension. He proposed a dramatic reenactment of Paula Welden's last hike, Helen reading letters in voiceover while Dom tracked a crimson jacket actress through sun-barred corridors of hemlock. On July 11th, they lugged gear to Woodford Hollow, following the Appalachian Gap footpath 30 yards beyond the old "No Winter Maintenance" sign. Their stand-in actress, local theatre hopeful Maggie Rowe, fidgeted inside a thrift store red coat borrowed from wardrobe. Dom rehearsed tracking shots, Helen adjusted boom angles. Leo lit a cigarette and declared, "Let's put the triangle on film so it can't hide." Take one proceeded smoothly until Maggie reached the fork, where Paula allegedly vanished. A gust rattled laurel leaves like a rattlesnake. Maggie flinched, breaking character. Dom cursed real waste. Take two rolled. Maggie stepped forward, Dom dollied back, and the daylight dipped without warning, as though someone yanked a dimmer. Shadows oozed across bark. Dom's lens fogged despite dry heat. He cut. They broke for lunch, nerves frayed. Helen played back ambient tracks and frowned. Beneath wind hiss bloomed a chorus of distant voices overlapping, pitched impossibly low, yet sped up. They sounded like children clapping out a playground rhyme backwards. Leo smelled marketing gold. "We bottle that unease. Festivals will eat it up." That night, Helen spliced tape. At 22 minutes 10 seconds, the clicks morphed into a whispered phrase. "Roll window, repeated until the tape squealed overload. She ran down the corridor to share, heart jackhammering, but the others had collapsed into restless sleep. Morning of July 12th broke blisteringly hot. They planned to shoot B-roll along Nevers Hollow Ravine while fog still laced the floor. The path required one at a time, crossings of a rotted cedar footbridge. Helen went first, microphone in padded case. Dom followed, camera slung. Midspan, Leo stepped onto the planks. Then everything froze. Birdsong quit mid-trill, wind dropped dead, even flies orbited in muffled suspension. Dom later described it as someone hit pause on the reel of life. A metallic taste flooded tongues. Static ticked inside Leo's skull, identical to childhood AM radios scanning dead air. He looked up. An amber glow pooled 20 feet ahead, low to the ground, pulsing like the heartbeat of a sleeping furnace. It outlined a perfect rectangle, edges crisp, floating parallel to the ravine floor. Dom whispered, "Filter flare," but knew no lens made light behave like that. Helen, recording reflexively, captured 3 clicks, 5 clicks. Then a hushed female laugh twined with a boy's giggle and a chess piece tapping wood. Tick-tick, pause, tick-tick-tick. Leo eased closer, calling, "Maggie, knock it off if this is a prank." The rectangle widened, amber deepening to burnt gold. Frames in Dom's viewfinder stuttered. Sprockets squealed, though film rolled perfect. Leo reached toward the glow. Wind returned in a feral howl, bridge planks rattling. Helen screamed over the cans, her mic blasted by a surge akin to a jet engine spooling. Dom's camera jammed. Leo's outstretched hand touched the amber plane and vanished up to the wrist as though plunged into liquid glass. His expression flashed from thrill to horror. He tried to yank back. The amber boundary rippled like honey, gripping. Helen dropped gear, lunged, grabbing Leo's other arm. Dom seized Leo's belt. For a heartbeat, all 3 balanced on the bridge, tableau of desperation. Then the hush collapsed inward, a vacuum thud that blew pine needles upward in a geyser. The amber window collapsed to a point of incandescence and winked out. Leo, Helen, and Dom vanished with it. The bridge emptied except for Dom's sprung Bolex clattering planks, film unspooling into the ravine like celluloid entrails. Maggie Rowe, still uphill packing wardrobe, heard a sound like thunder inhaling and ran. She found only the camera coughing film, the Nagra deck smoking, and 3 sets of boot prints scorched into bridge timber. Char outlines, edges still smoldering. State police arrived by sundown. Evidence bags filled quickly. Warped camera body fused at seams, magnetic tape wiped clean except for an 8-second burst of high-frequency clicks. Leo's Zippo lighter melted into a pine knot. Helen's annotated sound log, where the last page read in green ink, "If you listen long enough, the mountain shapes your breath." Troopers halted the investigation short of a crime scene declaration. No bodies, no blood. Maggie suffered shock. Her testimony fragmented. Rectangles of light, laughter in reverse, a smell like pennies in microwave. The media devoured the missing filmmaker angle, dubbing them the Triangle 3. The case snagged national headlines until December, then drowned beneath Vietnam escalation and Apollo chatter. What survived from Echo Line's expedition was a single 5-second film clip, salvaged by a lab tech who'd pocketed a trimmed leader. The footage, screened on dusty lecture circuits, became underground myth. Frames pulse with strobing amber, tree silhouettes warp as if leaning away. For 2 frames, a silhouette of a woman in red appears behind Dom, though records say Maggie had left set minutes earlier. On the final frame, time code burns into emulsion. 07 ton 12 sun 66 11 11 11, an impossible timestamp that repeats the second and collapses millisecond ticks into mirrored numerals. Archivists who digitize the clip report software crashes. Analog projectors overheat lamp housings. Even modern LED setups flicker synchronous with those phantom clicks. Some audiences swear they smell ozone, others copper. A few claim that as the rectangle pulses, you can see 5 faint forms standing inside it. Wire-rimmed glasses catching light, a chess piece glinting, a boy's hand holding a dog leash of emptiness, a woman waving a yellow scarf, and behind them, a ponytailed figure whose lungs glow with glassy filaments. Maggie Rowe, refusing lifelong therapy, became a park ranger in Arizona's desert where no hemlocks grow. When asked why no marriage, no children, she says, "The window's still open out there, you know. Need to stay where I can see horizon all around. No surprises at my back." Her nightstand holds one relic, Leo's melted Zippo, copper surface etched by lightning-shaped cracks that some say cluster into a rough pentangle. In Vermont, authorities shuttered Never's Hollow footbridge, citing rot. Yet hikers occasionally bushwhack there, returning pale-eyed, muttering about a humming in their teeth and camera batteries draining in seconds. One backpacker's disposable Kodak printed nothing but amber smears and faint silhouettes of chessboards. By summer '67, the Bennington Triangle entered counterculture lore. LSD travelers sought it as a portal. Spiritualists brought quartz crystals to attune the window. Some disappeared for hours, stumbling back filthy and raving about landscapes of inverted forests and rivers that flowed upward. Most emerged shaken, but alive. Still, state officials posted fines for trespass, though enforcement proved futile against myth. Solar minimum cycled on schedule. Aurora shimmered green through August nights. A new pattern rose. The forest no longer took, but probed. Battery drains, time slips, voices overheard speaking your own thoughts, seconds before you formed them. Reported cases ballooned until 72, when Glastonbury fell eerily silent. No more clicks, no lights, as though the mountain exhaled, satisfied with its data set. Decades rolled on. Echo Line's vanished trio remained unsolved. Yet every July 12th at precisely 11:11 a.m., the last surviving pine slat of the old bridge weeps amber resin, despite no longer present trees feeding sap. Onlookers touch it and taste copper on the tongue. Recordings capture 3 clicks, 5 clicks, then static. The resin evaporates by noon, leaving wood dry and gray. Film archivists warn, If you freeze frame that 5-second clip at the point of maximum luminance, you risk retinal afterimages shaped like rectangles hovering at door threshold height. Look away too slowly, and corners of rooms seem to pulse amber. Some say those afterimages linger for weeks, appearing in mirrors behind you, shrinking whenever you turn, always receding just beyond reach, like a shutter half closed. What became of Leo, Helen, and Dom? Theories swarm, abducted into secret military bunkers, swallowed by a silicate-rich sinkhole, stepped through quantum portal to parallel Earth. Maybe they stand now in a landscape carved of amber light, watching us through a pane as thin as thought, mapping our world the way we once mapped theirs. In some versions, Leo is still grinning, filming realities no projector here can screen, waiting for someone to splice reels across dimensions and finish their documentary. For Glastonbury, the Triangle 3 marked subtraction number 7, if you count Louise Emery of Operation Window. Yet people rarely tally beyond 5. Minds cling to pentangles. The mountain, perhaps, respects no such symmetry. Perhaps it will keep sampling variables, age, occupation, motive, until it solves a theorem only granite can fathom. All we know is this. If you stand at Nevers Hollow on a blazing July morning, listen for that hush that devoured birdsong in '66. Should an amber rectangle bloom, remember cameras cannot save you, stories cannot protect you. Curiosity is the password the window most desires. Step back, close your eyes, count 3, then 5. Let the silence pass. Because Chapter 8 still lies ahead, a reckoning of present day when satellites peer down and algorithms detect the triangle's signatures pulsing hotter than ever, daring a digital world to explain the analog unknown. The final chapter will bring us to now, to you listening in the glow of your screen, heart ticking like sprockets, wondering what the window wants next. Chapter 8. The Algorithm's Candle. Clouds boil over Glastonbury's knife-edged ridge, their underbellies bruised pink by the dying sun. 40 miles above, a weather satellite blinks its cyclopean lens and sends down strips of data that flicker across screens in climate labs from Boston to Boulder. In 2025, nearly everything is measured. Air currents, seismic thumps, magnetic wobbles, tweets about tourist trails. Only one thing refuses to plot neatly on any graph. An irregular pulse of electromagnetic distortion that fans across the Bennington Triangle like a phantom heartbeat every few years, always around solstice, always after midnight. The anomaly lasts 22 seconds, then evaporates. Instruments shrug it off as noise, but noise has begun to tell stories. Deep learning models, trained to sniff patterns hidden from human intuition, notice the pulses cluster along 5 ancient logging roads. Historians overlay maps from the 19th century timber boom and gasp. Those roads form a pentangle centered on Glastonbury's summit bowl. The same pentangle locals scrawled in chalk on porch steps during the dread-filled 50s, the same shape etched by lightning cracks across Leo Kessler's melted Zippo. Algorithms do not respect myths, but they respect math, and the math says something impossible keeps repeating with the obedience of lunar phases. A startup called Thin Place Analytics purchases archival police files, converts brittle onion skin pages into searchable PDFs, and feeds every witness statement, dog-eared map, and reporter's flourish into a natural language engine. The machine spits out keywords weighted by eerie prominence. Window, click, copper, hush, echo. It tags a recurring phrase spoken 12 times across 80 years by unrelated witnesses, like pennies held too long in a closed fist. Somewhere in the code, probability flags run crimson. Journalist Joan Fraser, now 88 and still haunted by that taped whisper, sifts through the findings with trembling hands. She sees her own handwriting on scanned columns and feels the decades fold in on themselves. The AI insists the next pulse will crest on the night of December 11th at 23:11 Eastern Time. perfect mirror of the time code on Echo Line's final frame. Joan reaches for her coil-bound notebook, the one with coffee stains and a dog-eared page titled simply "Window," and writes a single line beneath it. If the mountain speaks again, someone must answer. The internet lights up when a crowd-funded expedition forms under the name Project Echo Return. They promise transparency, 24-hour live streams, redundant satellite uplinks, and a fail-safe perimeter of drones equipped with LiDAR and IR sensors. They invite Joan as emeritus advisor. She surprises herself by accepting. In late November, a convoy crawls up Route 9, vans draped in solar panels, crates stuffed with ruggedized servers, half a dozen grad students buzzing with caffeine and existential thrill. Base camp rises like an electronic Stonehenge on the stony shelf above Nevers Hollow. Drones buzz overhead, tracing loops that look from below like silver dragonflies. The team lays fiber optic cable, pounds cold anchors into granite, and calibrates instruments that read the world as columns of numbers. Everything is recorded, everything time-stamped. The mountain watches from behind its black spruce eyelashes, patient as always. December 9th. Tests run clean. Seismic lines hum, magnetometers purr. The live stream chat scrolls with viewers throwing pixelated flashlight emojis. Some locals come bearing hot cider and cautious smiles. Others stay home, curtains drawn, muttering that numbers cannot cage what doesn't want to be caught. December 10th. The wind is wrong, too warm for Vermont, carrying a scent like iron filings swirling in river mist. Camp sensors show micro-fluctuations in the magnetic field, irregular but rising in amplitude. Forest sounds begin to stagger, as though time itself hiccups. A barred owl hoots. The echo arrives a half-beat early instead of late. The data logs it, but hearts feel it first. Midday, Joan walks the perimeter with a cane that ticks on stones like a metronome, marking some funereal tempo. She pauses at the rust-slewed footbridge remnants, leans over, and listens. No water runs this high season, but from the dark ravine comes the faint click, click, click of something tapping wood. 3 clicks, pause, 5 clicks, pause. A pattern older than the satellites overhead. Joan presses her recorder close to the planks. The microphone registers nothing, but her bones do. December 11th. Snow begins at dusk, fat flakes that fall in hypnotic spirals, muffling drone propellers until sky and ground speak the common hush. Viewers surge on the live stream, 30,000, 80,000, 500,000, digital campfire faces reflected in glassy screens across the world. They watch as crimson numerals in the corner crawl toward 23:11:5. Data spikes. Magnetometers yaw, accelerometers jitter though the earth is still. Camera feeds, pixelate, compress, smear amber streaks across the snow. At 23:11:08, every microphone swallows sound, broadcasting an absolute zero of silence that aches in earbuds. Then come 3 clicks, perfect and cold. Pause, 5 clicks, pause. Viewers type frantic messages that vanish before posting, chat windows collapsing into amber rectangles. In the command tent, servers overheat even as coolant pumps whine. One monitor shows an impossible feed. 5 figures walking hand in hand through a swirling pentagon of snow just outside camp lines. A girl in a red parka wipes frost from wire-rimmed spectacles. An army veteran adjusts a cap he no longer wears. A boy cups his hands to call a dog no one can see. A young woman lifts a yellow bandana toward the blank sky. Behind them strides a ponytailed hiker whose ribs glow softly, as though lit from within by candlelight made of glass shards. Joan steps outside, her breath crystallizing into a cloud that hangs rather than drifts, each ice mote trembling. She sees the figures, feels an old tug in her lungs where recordings once lived. Something like copper on her tongue. She understands. Not knowledge, but recognition. like meeting someone whose name you can't recall yet, whose story you know by heart. She drops her cane. The snow accepts it without sound. The mountain exhales a sigh that is not wind, not storm, but the long release of pages turned at last to an ending. Towers of light rise between spruce trunks, not amber now, but clear, lambent, colorless as molten quartz. They rotate, align, and open, window panes becoming doorframes becoming corridors that lead to unlit halls inside some geometry beyond Euclid's reach. Joan walks. Cameras capture the outline of her parka, the slow swing of her braid. Data packets try to name the shapes, fail, try again, fail. At 23:11:11, every watch in camp stops. Stream feeds blink white, then black, then return. Snowflakes resume falling with ordinary gravity. Joan is gone. The 5 figures are gone. The only prints are hers, ending mid-stride beside the melted traces of Leo's team, still faintly singed into the bridge timbers. Server fans spin down. Drones descend as though commanded. And in every headset, down to the last earbuds on the last viewer in the last lit bedroom across the planet, a child's laughter rings, bright, startled, fading into the copper-scented hush. The live stream stops. The chat goes blank. Across the globe, screens display a single line of white text. The window remembers who listens. For the next 22 seconds, no electronic device within 50 miles of Glastonbury records any signal. Not static, not hum, nothing. When systems reboot, data dumps show a blank band in every log, the digital equivalent of a held breath. In the days that follow, analysts pore over corrupted drives, salvage partial telemetry, and piece together mosaic frames where Joan turns halfway toward the camera, mouth open as if to speak. Her gaze meets the lens with serene urgency. Lip readers disagree on the message. Some say she mouths home, others open, still others hush. The mountain offers no clarification. Project Echo Return dissolves in lawsuits and NDAs. Yet servers outside the seizure net hide copies of the final minutes, and from them curious coders extract a sound barely audible beneath the clicks. A low looping cadence like mechanical wings or distant applause. When slowed, the cadence resolves into syllables repeating something close to "bring a light." Glastonbury is fenced again. Signs read "Research Exclusion Zone." No entry. But exclusion is invitation to some hearts. Already message boards thrum with plans. Small crews, lighter gear, blockchain contracts promising real-time immutable evidence. They believe encryption can tame the unknowable. They are wrong, of course, but curiosity is a ladder against any wall. The forest stands patient, shadows thickening beneath fir boughs. At twilight, the ridge looks like a mouth half smiling. Somewhere between snowfall and birdsong, an echo waits for a voice to match. A window waits for a palm to press against its cool, trembling surface. The mountain counts time in clicks of copper coins dropped into a jar whose bottom no one has ever heard. So if you find yourself near Bennington some star-hung winter night, and the hush grows dense enough to sculpt, and your compass needle begins to tremble like a frightened animal, remember this story. Remember that 5 missing is not a stopping place, and 7 may only be an ellipsis. Remember that every legend is a bargain whispered through wood smoke. Do you want to know, truly know, what breathes behind the curtain? If not, turn back before the first click and never look over your shoulder. But if you do want to know, if your heart thrums in sync with invisible metronomes and your lungs taste like struck pennies, then step lightly. Leave a lantern burning behind you, and when the hush tilts the world on its axis, invite courage to walk at your side. You may glimpse wonders no data stream can harness, or you may learn why echoes here do not merely answer, but beckon. Either way, the window will be listening. It always is. Dim the lights. Share this tale with those who cherish the shiver of the unknown, and subscribe so you never miss the next real story whispered from the edge of the dark. Until then, listen closely, travel wisely, and if you hear 3 clicks followed by 5, hold your breath. The mountain remembers.